Well, hello there, people. We're going to do some reaction, and as you guys can see, I have 4 videos I need to react to, and let's go into full screen. Anyway, we're going to look at this from Leon Zergay, something like that. Actually, I've watched his channel before. He has some really great content. But this one here, I've watched it before, but I can barely remember it because I was doing something else. I was just like simply paying attention, but I find it really interesting. Don't switch to Linux, it sucks for most people, and as far as I know, this dude here is more or less a Windows guy. Maybe a Linux, I think he's running Linux also, I don't know, I can't remember to be honest. You go check his channel out, it's a really good channel, amazing content. Let's get into this.
If you're a Windows person thinking of trying Linux for the first time, buckle up sunshine, it's gonna be a bumpy ride. In the beginning it was all unicorns and butterflies, but now it's been and oh boy, it's definitely not what I thought it would be, and the halo effect started to wear off. Before I start, I want to be clear. This isn't a Windows is better than Linux video. If you're a Linux user and you think that everything else sucks, feel free to skip this video. As some of you know, I installed Windows 11 and of course experienced the usual stuff that you can expect with a brand new operating system. And whilst the bugs are continued to get fixed, I thought I would try Linux. So here is my Linux expectation versus Linux reality.
This is a place where a lot of people, they tend to lose their Linux journey, because you hear people like me that have been using Linux for many years talking about how great Linux is, what it can do, why you should use it. And we look at Linux from our perspective. We talk about what we can do with Linux, what we are doing with Linux, and a lot of things that we do that Linux is not good at. that is like stabbing you in the kidney once in a while. You know, you're using Linux and then you get a kidney fucking jab and you're like, oh, this fucking hurts, now I have to deal with this shit for like 2 hours. We are kind of used to that, so to us it's not a big of a problem. So we tend to forget that a lot of the things that is like drilled into our backbone about Linux, you know, a lot of the quirks and irritations and stuff that we just basically deal with without thinking about it, we tend to not tell people. And we tend to overhype it massively to people. So when they are going to use Linux, they kind of get a little bit of a, like he said here, reality versus expectation. Like what they expect is not what it really is. And it's basically our fault, because I have not watched many Linux YouTubers that have been able to accurately talk about how it is being a new Linux user. Let's hear what he has to say.
Check the expectation. When I was researching the idea of moving to Linux, everywhere I looked there was a promise of an amazing community of Linux people who would be by my side as we cut with Windows.
The brotherhood, or the cult, or the sect, or the religion, call it what you will.
Cord and stick it to the man. The reality, what a load of
Yep.
There's no community of Linux users, but there are a bunch of Linux distro tribes, and boy do they hate each other.
Yeah.
I dared ask which distro I should use based on my requirements, and instead of getting, hey, you should try this, oh, hey, you should look at that, I mostly got, don't ever install blank. So that's not super helpful.
You see, people? I'm not the only one saying this. And this is, again, this is more common than you think. Again, because we have been using Linux for so long, we kind of ignore those kind of people, okay? We kind of just accept it as being part of Linux. But the reality is, that's not how a lot of newcomers to Linux look at it, because for them, it's not old, it's new. You know, they don't know that there are these fucking tribes and fighting and debates, and you have to take a stance on this or else you're not a real Linux user, and you can't fucking like proprietary software or else you're not a real Linux. That's not all of that shit. They don't expect that, because we don't rarely talk about it, because to us it's just like, yeah, it's part of Linux, we've been dealing with it for fucking decades now. You know, we just ignore them, but we forget to tell that to people. And some do it on purpose because it's a really big red flag. You kind of have a checklist of things you have to take a stance on. Distributions, init system, package formats, development philosophies, release philosophies, rolling statics, and so on. Tiling Windows Manager versus floating Windows Managers or desktop environment. What desktop environment versus what desktop environment. What Windows Manager versus what Manager. And you basically have to check a list and then type in your preferences, and then you send in the paper to the Linux community, and they are like, you are part of that group, so you get what I'm trying to say. It's like fucking mental, man.
The expectation? We welcome newbies who are coming across from Windows and Mac, and if you get stuck, there are so many places you can go and ask questions.
There are many places you can go and ask questions. It's just that they are not that friendly if you don't buy into the Kool-Aid.
And get help. The reality, well, there are two camps here. Those who are generally helpful and are happy to help us newbies, and those mostly a bunch of elitist, we're better than you. Unfortunately, the latter group is far louder than the former.
Yes. And that's why I'm fed up with people telling me when I'm criticizing this, oh, well, it's just a minority. I know a lot of good people. Then speak the fuck up, okay? If you see one obnoxious, read the fucking manuals, cock-sucking, mom basement-dwelling idiot, then we need 10 times more good people speaking up. What most people is like, they look at that cock-sucking, motherfucking, dog-fucking, mom-sucking, tit-sucking idiot, and they are like walking away. So when new people come into forums, they only see that fucking obnoxious idiot, because the good people don't speak up. The good majority of people is not being like, hey, that's not how we talk to people. Or, hey, grow up, you motherfucker, you know. Hey, get a fucking girlfriend or boyfriend. Get some fucking, sex in your life. Get some human contact, Chill out, Yeah. I get what you're saying, but there's different ways of saying it. You don't have to be the obnoxious, toxic motherfucker. Just be nice, There's nobody holding them accountable. So they just run free like fucking naked people on the street that are peeing in your garden and taking a shit in your front door. And nobody's like just let them. Just let them. It's okay. They're only doing it at 5 people instead of all of your houses. So, yeah, it's okay that 5 out of 1,000, or not 5 out of, let's say, 20 houses get a poop on the front lawn by a crazy human. That's okay. It's only 5. Just let them be idiots. No. Go and slap them in the face. You know what? You did detrimental to what we're trying to do here. So speak up, people.
Look, as you can see from this channel, I don't believe in just showing a solution to a problem. So when I was posting specific questions outlining the research that I've done, the steps that I've taken, and where I was stuck, I was certainly not expecting someone to hand a solution on a silver platter. However, I didn't expect for so many people to reply with, RTFM.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, could you be any less helpful? That's like telling someone who is lost and asking for direction that they should learn about compass points, orientation in time and space as you laugh and walk away. At least point us in the right direction as we fumble our way through this. And remember, these questions were posted in forums that were specifically titled Linux for Newbies. So
Amen, brother. I'm buying into his religion right now.
Thanks for nothing. The expectation? Things in Linux may be different to how they work on Windows, but they surely do work. The reality? Somewhat bullshit. Not everything just works. Not everything has an equivalent app, especially when you venture beyond the basics of Office Productivity Suite. When you do find apps, they simply don't have the same features and options that their Windows equivalent apps have. So you spend so much time manually...
I can't fucking agree more. Like, he's like reading my fucking mind.
Tweaking settings. Reminds me of the olden days of Windows when we needed to change the autoexec.bat, configs.sys, INI files, and changes to the IRQ on the Sound Blaster.
I remember those days. I had a friend reinstalled his Windows 90, what fucking ever it was on his 98, I think it was on his computer. And his mouse didn't work. We had to go in and change the I/O because the mouse was conflicting with, I think it was a sound card or something like that, something of that nature. So one of them worked periodically. And I say this a lot, and a lot of Linux people, they fucking kick me in my balls, and that's why I have like these massive swollen up balls right now. It's not because I have a big dick, it's just I'm getting hurt a lot, okay? But yeah, I say this to people a lot, that Linux today is still like, we are living like, if you want to, from a usability, from an average usability, we're not talking about a tech. If you're talking for the everyday Joe, Linux is kind of like running Windows 98 to XP. That's the usability we are in. A lot of limitation, a lot of fucking things not working as they should. A lot of things that you have to go back ways in to configure and do and tweak and mess around with. And a lot of people love that. I loved Windows more when Windows 95, when Windows was shit. You know, Windows that works is not really that fun to me because there's nothing for me to fix. But Windows 95, 98, ME, and Windows 2000 was actually really, really stable. But Windows XP up to Service Pack 1 or 2 was really finicky, and even with Service Pack 2 and the other service packs, it was still somewhat finicky. I love that because I could go in and tinker. I'm a tinker, you know. But for most people, they don't want to deal with that shit. They don't. They are not like us. They don't live in the past. They are not nerds that love to fucking slam their head into the keyboard and then go nuts with Nano in a configuration file or Vim or whatever they're using. They just want to, button, click, work, happy, go, eat some hot dogs. That's all they want. So yeah, yeah.
Just to make everything work. And I'm sorry, that really isn't owning the operating system or whatever crap they tell you when you dare ask questions in the mighty community. It's just a total waste of time. There are loads of incompatibility issues with hardware devices, printers, scanners, cameras, audio, video mixers, non-English keyboards, and don't get me started on processors and graphics cards. If you make the mistake of asking these questions, you get attacked for using it wrong or getting told off for buying the wrong hardware devices in the first place. Oh, please. On what planet does it make sense for anyone to throw out perfectly working hardware to replace it with another brand just to make it work on Linux?
Why overcomplicate your life so you can put a stamp on your forehead that say I'm a Linux user that nobody cares about? Why is that so important for people? Well, because they bought into the Kool-Aid, the philosophy, the politics, and you think they have a bigger dick than the other guy because they're using Linux. No, nobody gives a fuck about Linux. Nobody cares about Linux. It's just a hobby. Get over your fucking self. It's like me judging you for not using Leatherman. You're using Gerb or something else, and I'm being an obnoxious, toxic motherfucker. Oh, you don't know how to use multi-tools, okay? Like, I hate that fucking mentality.
And it's not really Linux's fault. What it seems to boil down to is simple. Although this is somewhat changing, companies are just not that focused on Linux when they're developing software or developing hardware.
Why? Because we don't have a bigger user base. Why do we not have a bigger user base? Previous statements he's just made.
So it's up to the die-hard Linux people to create utilities that bridge the gap, and in many cases they do it for free. But here's the thing. You can be as pissed off as you liked about closed source applications and closed source operating systems, but I'm sorry to tell you this, but the argument that just because Linux is mainly open source doesn't by default make it better. Nope. Something new comes out.
It all depends on the developer. It all depends on the quality of the code, meaning it depends on how good are the developer at developing software. And is there actually someone outside in the community looking at the code? Where in the sad reality is, and he don't go into this, and I kind of get why, because it's a little bit more of a nerdy side, but another argument is that, oh, Linux is better because it's open source, because everyone can look at the code. Here's a really, 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 really reality slapping you all dicks and vaginas. Yeah, nobody really does. I'm sorry to say it, not even developers that know how to look at the code sit down on a Saturday morning with their morning brew and their cereals in front of them, be like, let's look over the fucking source code for LibreOffice to see if there's any fucking shit going on. Most people, they find a bug, they go and complain to the developer. Some of them may help out or say, oh, it's a really simple bug, I think I can fix it, and they send in the fix, and then the developer's like, oh, it's not done in our way, and blah, 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 and then politics start to mix in with it. There's not that many people from outside of the project that are contributing to the project code-wise. Mostly it's people within the project. And yes, people go from outside and start to become part of a project, which is amazing. This is just me saying that the majority of people, so let's say 99% of what's going on with code in a project is done by people within the project. Once in a while, you get someone that has a really, really simple bug, they fix it, send the code in, but most of the time, it's done by people from inside the project. The Linux kernel is a little bit different. Most of the submits that's coming out from the outside is done by massive multi-million, billion-dollar companies, and not you and me. So it's either big, massive corporations that are helping you run the software and fixing the software you have, or it's people already developing the software. People from within inside the project. But people don't really say that's because 99% or 95%, and again, this is just me saying that most people using Linux have no fucking idea how to look at the source code, even if they are a developer. Because you have to understand what the development practices is for this project. You have to understand the development culture. And you have to have intimate knowledge, meaning you basically have to read a lot of the code and talk to the developers to listen to their philosophies. Why are you using this function and this object in the way that you're using it instead of doing this? Why are you using while loops instead of else if and stuff like that? So you understand what they do, and it takes a lot of time to get familiar with the code. It's not just like, oh, I know what a while loop is, I know what an else if statement is, I know what a function is. That's not enough.
It says it works for Windows, it says it works for Mac, and it says nothing about Linux. So you spend the next couple of hours researching to see if it will work. And again, I'm not hating on Linux itself. I'm hating on the experience from a Windows user point of view trying to move to Linux. I'm hating on the fact that some people think that you need to put down us Windows people and bash our choices in order to show how great they are. I'm hating on the fact that people can't recognize that not everyone in the world is in the same boat. Not everybody has 10 hours a day to learn.
Amen. Exactly. Like, this is the experience that and he's a knowledgeable guy. He's a knowledgeable motherfucker, okay? Imagine that you don't have his knowledge, that you're just an average Joe, a normal housewife, a normal fucking houseman, your normal kid that have average computing skill, meaning you can turn it off and go onto the internet and look at cat pictures all day. They would be 10 times more frustrated than this dude here right now because they don't have his background. They don't even know that you go to a forum and ask for help. It don't even come across their mind. They are just like, oh, this is fucking shit, and they're going back to whatever brain system they're coming from. So him having this experience, what Linux users should be doing, or distribution makers, they should talk to people like him and be like, you don't have a good experience on the Linux. Let me take my massive fucking notebook out. What is wrong? And then make a shit ton of fucking notations and take all his point or her points in, whoever they are talking to. And then go back to the fucking drawing board and say, you know what, dev team, we need to fix this. But what Linux do instead, they're like, no, we don't need to fix anything. It's you that's the problem. It's proprietary software that's the problem. It's the development companies that's the problem. It's the hardware companies that's the problem. It's not us. It's everyone else. How is the best way to not advance the life is to point fingers at everyone else instead of looking in at yourself what you're doing wrong. A lot of the bullshit we have with Linux is Linux' own fault, meaning the developers within Linux, the politics within Linux, the philosophies within Linux, the community, all of these things mixed together. We have to start to look at Linux and say, what are we doing wrong? Instead of just be like, bad. No, bad. Get what I'm saying here?
A new OS, some of us have stuff to do. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that the comments below are going to be filled with Linux people who by now are frothing at the mouth, picking apart bits of these videos, and thereby simply proving my point. I'm also not leaving Linux, but as of right now, as a desktop is just more of a hassle than it's worth. And if you're not technical, the moment you step outside of the pretty GUI interface, be prepared for a world of downtime, loads of frustration from that incredibly unhelpful community. And this...
Yeah, and here's the thing. Linux can do a lot with GUI interfaces. That's great. We have come a long way since I started using it in the 90s. But, and this is to all those CLI people out there, where do people use command line interfaces in the server market? What have been the default standard for the consumer operating systems to do stuff with it, to basically configure and use the operating system? How have people been doing that as a standard since actually before 1995, but let's just say 1995 is where it really kicked off with Windows 95. GUI. That's 27 years that people, the majority of people using computers and professionals to a degree of basically 98% of the user base, meaning that, if you take the markets, macOS is also GUI driven. So if Linux only have, let's say, 2% of the desktop market right now, that would be like 98% of the desktop market have been using GUI tools in 27 fucking years. Why? Because they have figured out that it's actually better than the command line, or else they will not do it. It may not be faster, but it's better for support, it's better to understand, it's better for new people, it's more intuitive, and so I could go on and on and on why GUI tools are so fucking powerful for the average user. So if 98% of the computer world have moved away from the command line, and 2% is sitting with their fucking dong in their hand, and CLI is better, man. Why do you think 98% of the fucking computer world have moved on? And why do you think that, let's just say 80% of the corporate world or 90% of the corporate world have moved on from the command line? Because it's better for the average person and people using it. May not be better for admins. But here's a fact. Not everyone is a fucking computer admin, okay? You get what I'm saying here.
This is where YouTube is your friend. Loads and loads of amazing creators on here on this platform. So now, if you're thinking about installing Windows 11, here's how you can do that without removing Windows 10. And over here, you can check out a video that YouTube thinks you should watch. Hit the head down here to subscribe if this is your first time.
Yeah, go smash his head in with that fucking like and subscription here. And he has almost 800,000 subscribers. It's a great tech channel. I will say his comments down here for the majority of what I've read when I watched this video like 6 months ago. I think I watched it when it came out. They are not that bad. The comment section is not that bad. Like I said, great content. I couldn't agree more. And he's talking about all of the things that you don't hear the Linux users talk about. Why? Because it makes Linux look bad. So they don't do it. But they should, because Linux should look bad. Why should Linux look bad? Because that forces people to make Linux better. I hear a lot, why are you so critical about Linux? Why do you criticize this and that? I want Linux to be better. You rarely hear me criticize macOS. You rarely hear me criticize Windows. Why? I don't really care about Windows and macOS the same way I care about Linux. And the only way you get Linux to get better is to fix the things that Linux is not good at. But if you don't tell the developers, if you don't highlight it, if you don't talk about what Linux is not good at, it will probably never be fixed, or it will not be fixed as fast, because then it's up to the developers to basically be like, we have this thing that we have forgotten because nobody really, moaned and bitched about it. The more we moan and bitch about the shortcomings of Linux, the more incentive the developers and the distribution makers have to fix it, because they don't want us to bitch and moan. They want us to shut the fuck up. It's not good advertisement when we're saying, this is bad. So they want to fix it more than if we're not saying anything about it. We should highlight the good things about open source and Linux, of course, but we should definitely also talk about the negatives. And most Linux YouTubers are only about the positives. That's yes man mentality. If you look at businesses and you see why a lot of them fails, it's because they hire a lot of yes men. They don't get. So that means that when they're making a bad decision, the yes man is just like, or yes girls is just like, yeah, that's fine. Then they make bad decisions and everything go bad. Same with Linux. If you're just fucking slapping them in the back and good job, no matter how many fucking turds they put out, it will never get fixed. And here's the thing. Hating on Ubuntu, criticizing snap packages the way that the Linux community does, that's not criticism, okay? That's a swipe war. Hating one desktop environment versus another is not criticism. That's a swipe war. You're not part of our tribe, so therefore we hate you. You have to look at the fundamental things that's wrong with Linux, and that's not the desktop environment. The desktop environment is amazing under Linux. The universal package managers under Linux is amazing under Linux. Any package manager you have under Linux is amazing for what they are doing. That's not the problem with Linux. Snaps is not the problem with Linux. Ubuntu is not the problem with Linux. It's lack of capabilities, lack of usability, lack of easiness, lack of convenience, lack of hardware support. The way the community is towards each other and other people. Those are the fundamental problems with Linux. It's not snap packages or flat packages. Or Ubuntu versus Zorin versus Arch, or System D versus ANET 6. Those are not the problems with Linux because they all fucking works. It's just a different of philosophy, opinion, and ideas. There's nothing wrong with them. Yes, Flatpaks may be faster than Snap packages and stuff like that. Yeah, but it's not a fundamental problem with Linux that make Linux unusable. Hardware supported, the community is, and all of the other things he just talked about right here. That's what we need to work on. See you all later. Bye bye.